Hey friends, I'm Ami and I'm so excited to be back at this amazing conference. I last did a keynote here 5 years ago, and things looked a little different then. I was extremely pregnant. If you know, you know. We were in person, I was in a different job, but one thing that hasn't changed is how amazing it is to be surrounded by so many wonderful women who are going through similar challenges and experiences and getting to share what we're learning. I'm currently Chief Product Officer at Faire. And before that, I was head of product and design for WhatsApp and the head of product for Facebook's $50 billion ads business. But I spent half of my career not in product. I worked in product marketing, PR, privacy, I ran a small VC fund. So my career so far has been a little like a small plates dinner. It's a little bit of everything. So it's been a bit of a winding path to CPO. And I wanted to share some of the lessons that took me a long time to learn, in case they save you time on your journey. All right, so we have 15 minutes. I'll share 5 tips that have helped me in my career. Number 1, if I can see a problem, it's mine to solve. Number 2, turn what a failure into what a useful experiment. Number 3, focus on the customer. Number 4, take accountability for things no one is asking me to do. And number 5, learn how to make decisions in a new space. Now, if you caught my talk 5 years ago, you might remember I gave 5 tips based on 15 years of experience. This time, I'm doing 5 tips based on 20 years of experience. The good news is you're getting 4 years of experience per tip. The bad news is it looks like my rate of learning tips is definitely decelerating. Let's dive in. Tip number 1, if I can see a problem, it's mine to solve. I joined Facebook in 2007 as a temp in PR. I left my job at Microsoft, and the only place I wanted to work next was Facebook. So I offered to do anything they needed. I would say I was eager. Some might say I was annoying. But after I sent a lot of follow-up emails, I got a call back from Facebook's head of PR. And she offered me a job as a temp to review press releases for the first developer conference. I said, absolutely, and I did. And that led to another interesting problem and another, and I ended up spending 15 years following interesting problems across Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. At some point, someone hired me full-time. It turned out that just saying yes to solving the problems I saw in front of me was a pretty good way to keep adding value, even if those problems weren't always technically a part of my job. But I've had to constantly remind myself to take on those problems without waiting for permission. The big thing that held me back was I used to think there was this group of omniscient senior leaders who knew all the most important problems. And one day, when the time was right, they would come up and tap me on the shoulder and say, Ami, we've got the problem for you. And I kind of waited for that moment. But over time, I realized that if I can see a problem, I'm probably the best person to solve it, because maybe no one else can even see it. And of course, this feels scary even to this day. And it's helped me to remember a few things. A, stepping up is supposed to feel terrifying. Even taking my newest CPO job was terrifying. I was leaving a place I knew well after 15 years of being there. But trying something new is supposed to feel a little scary because we've never done it before. And B, take perfection off the table. I have to tell you, being a parent has really taught me a lot about this. I know I am not the best person to teach small children how to behave, but there's no one better around to do it. And if it's not clear exactly what problem I should be saying yes to, these phrases have helped me find a path. So if I'm talking to a peer, I could say, hey, I noticed you spend a lot of time doing X, so I took a stab at a draft for you. Does this help? That way it's clear I'm not stepping on anyone's toes, I'm just trying to get us all to a solution quicker. Or if I'm talking to my manager, I could say, what are you doing today that I can take off your plate? And that way they can scan their calendar and pick something easy to hand off. They get some time back, I get exposed to something new and exciting. Everyone's happy. All right, tip number 2. Turn what a failure into what a useful experiment. Let's do a quick thought experiment. Can you think of a failure that you've had recently? I can think of about a million. I have 3 kids, so trust me, failure is part of my daily life. Whether it's not packing exactly the right kind of sandwich in my kid's lunchbox, or at work, not pushing hard enough on a strategy point, or not moving fast enough to run an experiment. And that's just this week. But we don't talk about failure a lot, maybe because there's research that shows that women are penalized more than others for perceived failures. And so for years in my career, every time I failed at the smallest thing, I would carry that failure with me, and it made it harder for me to take risks. I can still remember a few years ago, I was in a really big meeting with my boss's boss, and I was trying to make an important point. But I couldn't get the words right, and people couldn't understand what I was talking about. And at some point, my boss's boss said, "I can't understand what you're saying. We got to move on." On the one hand, that is such a small thing. It was one comment in one meeting. But it felt so mortifying that I still remember it years later, that wave of embarrassment. But failure is part of life, and it is definitely part of growth. So instead of thinking about these moments as failures, I try to think of them as experiments. For that meeting that I failed at, how could I be clearer next time? How did I feel? How do I want to feel instead? And I focus on, what did I learn? What information can I take away with me? And that turns every failure into just a way to learn more. It also helps to remember that no matter what failure I'm dealing with at work or at home, like running a bad meeting or not moving fast enough on a problem or forgetting my kid's soccer shoes, that same thing is going to happen again. So I don't just have to deal with the problem, I also have to teach myself, how am I going to recover fast from this problem next time? And that way I can keep learning without getting weighed down. All right, tip number 3, focus on the customer. One thing that's been important in my path to CPO is actually focusing on the P part, the product itself. We talk a lot about leadership and building teams and making strategic decisions, and all of those are important. But our customers don't care how strong our teams are or how interesting our strategy is. They care about the product that's in their hands. So we need to learn what's going to make us all the most effective product leaders. The thing that's worked best for me is to make sure I have a clear picture of the user. If I can feel what my users feel, if I feel like I have a user sitting on my shoulder whispering to me how they feel about the product, I know I'm going to make better decisions. But sometimes it's hard to get that understanding. I'm at Faire, which is a product for small businesses and particularly local independent retailers. And while I do sometimes daydream about opening a coffee shop where you can also buy plants and buttery pastries, I am not yet a small business owner. So I don't really know what it's like to have to find the exact kind of flowy boho dress that my customers will love, or to know whether all the greeting cards I've ordered are going to come in time for Mother's Day. But luckily, there are a bunch of ways to get that empathy. Here's a few really easy ones that have worked for me. A, search for reviews and videos. When I search app stores and social media for my product, there's praise, there's complaints, there's product gossip, and I can get a texture of people's experience. Or sometimes I'll even find instructional videos that show me exactly where we need clearer instruction inside the product. B, I look at internal customer support tickets. This is where customers are literally telling us they need help. C, I try to use my product in another language. How far can I get based on just the intuitive design cues? D, I use the product. Sometimes I think of this almost as a scavenger hunt. How fast can I complete the most important tasks? And E, talk to customers. Whenever I meet someone who uses my product, I ask them, what's working well and what would you change if you could just wave a wand? And this is one of my favorite parts of the job because even when they have really tough feedback, it's inspiring to see how important our product is to them. And it reminds me why I'm so lucky to get to work on these products. I know you could think of 1,000 more suggestions. The hard part hasn't been coming up with ways to experience this. It's been setting aside time to do it every day. Because I know something about this experience is going to be painful, whether I'm reading a review that makes me cringe or hearing a customer tell me that my product isn't working for them. But just like with most growth, those uncomfortable moments are exactly when I learn the most. Tip number 4, take accountability for things no one is asking me to do. Early on in my career, there was kind of a clear path for what career growth looked like. For example, as a PM, first I was responsible for a feature, and then a product area, and then a bigger domain, and then an entire product line. And it wasn't easy to actually do those things. But I could look at my career ladder, I could look at some colleagues who are a little ahead of me, and I could get an idea of what the next level looked like. But after I got to director, I couldn't really see a clear path to follow anymore. I didn't know a lot of people at more senior levels, and I really didn't know a lot of people who reminded me of me. I mean, I'll tell you, especially all the really senior women I met seemed like super women. They were awake all the time. They were always well-dressed. They'd already done their workout by 4 a.m. every day. And I was like, I sleep a lot, and I don't really have a plan, and I haven't worn heels since the year 2009. So I just kind of assumed that I'd never be successful. And I had to wonder, what does my growth even look like? And how do I get there? I had to learn that after a certain level of seniority, there is no mold for what will get my career to the next level. Our industry changes every day. Our customers change every day. So I'm going to have to constantly reassess what's most needed now. And B, there's no mold for how I should operate as a leader. There is not yet a cookie cutter career ladder for a senior technical woman who has 3 kids and likes puns and can eat cereal 3 meals a day. I mean, if you know of one, sign me up. But until then, I've got to figure out what feels authentic to me. And so I've seen the most growth when I've said, no one's asking me to do this, but I'm going to do it because I think it's important. Whether that's making a tough change to a product direction or just telling a joke to kick off a weekly meeting. Now, this can be terrifying. It requires me to think about my understanding of the customer, what I think is important for the company, and how I choose to express myself. And then I actually have to put myself and my opinions out there, which can be even scarier. But I also try to see the freedom and empowerment in it. Since there aren't clear expectations I need to fit into, I have a chance to try on both what's important to the company and authentic to me. So I have control over how I show up as a leader. Tip number 5, learn how to make decisions in a new space. I have changed roles and domains a lot of times in my career. And as we talked about, recently I moved to a whole new company in a brand new problem space. And every time I change jobs, it's hard because I always feel like I should be as useful at the beginning of my new job as I was at the end of my last job. But that's impossible. I spent years learning how to do my last job. I knew the best snacks in the micro kitchen. I knew where the bathrooms were. I knew why the conference rooms were named whatever they were named. But there's no way I'll know all that, much less the details of all my products in my new job right away. So it's really helped me to focus on learning how to make decisions and start adding value when I don't have all the context. I'd start by breaking down the parts of decision, because every decision up close really has 3 parts. A, listen. B, decide. C, document and execute. And we all tend to focus on B, right? It's called a decision, so the deciding part seems like the most important. But maybe surprisingly, I've had the best results when I focus first on A, listening. Because that helps me understand not just the context, but also how my new colleagues feel about the problem. I then focus on C, documenting and executing. That way I can hear how other people are thinking through the decisions, the principles they're using, and I can train myself on how we make decisions here. Then I can write all of that down, figure out the next steps, and send out notes. I always think taking notes is right up there with bringing the donuts, so it makes me feel useful right away, which is so important in those early days. And then over time, I listen more actively and ask better questions so the decision gets clearer. I document thoroughly so the next decision gets clearer. And I end up naturally stepping into the decision-making role. It's helped to have some responses handy when I'm feeling pressure to decide something right away. I say things like, this is the kind of decision I expect to make quickly in the future, but right now I'm still ramping. I want to be respectful of the team's time, so let me get some feedback. I'll get back to you tomorrow with a decision. And there you have it, 5 tips that took me 20 years to learn. If I can see a problem, it's mine to solve. Turn what a failure into what a useful experiment. Focus on the customer. Take accountability for things no one is asking me to do. And learn how to make decisions in a new space. I hope that these tips come in handy on your journey. If you want more details on any of them, they're all on my Substack, where I post a new tip every couple weeks. And most of all, I want to say thank you for being here. Being able to share experiences inside a group like this has been one of the most valuable parts of my growth. Groups of women like this one have not only taught me how to do my job, they've helped me always feel seen and understood. So thank you, and enjoy the conference.